Well, those must be the anti-aircraft guns that are supposed to keep protecting Moscow. But what are they doing on the internet? More on this in the Situation Report. June 22, 2026. We are in the 5th year and only 120 days since the start of the full-scale invasion. Welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we'll look at why you shouldn't take pictures of anti-aircraft guns. We'll also take a look at what's happening in Crimea regarding the oil crisis. And of course, we'll also look at Ukrainian hackers who have accomplished something quite interesting. More on that in the report, so let's get started. I already reported on that about a week ago. At that time, the first Russian tankers and supply convoys on their way to Crimea were accompanied by mobile drone defense groups. In the meantime, these units are now apparently seen on a much larger scale. Footage shows several mobile groups traveling along supply routes, securing military convoys and logistics vehicles. That says a lot about the situation. Others, which can't be defended as well right now with hard kill measures, disguise themselves as wood or as milk trucks, trying to get fuel more or less to the front under the guise of a civilian vehicle. The Russians can no longer carry out their transports on the roads normally, no matter what form they take. They have to use additional vehicles, weapons, personnel, or resources just to make sure that fuel and supplies even arrive at all. For Ukraine, this is already a great success. Every convoy that needs an escort requires men who will be missing at the front, and it uses up more resources that Russia really shouldn't have. The crisis is still ongoing, though. We already saw that in yesterday's Situation Report. Fuel is no longer being sold to civilians or businesses in Crimea. This is only possible now if you work for a security agency responsible for protecting the transports or for the military or the government. And besides the mobile convoys, of course, there is still the greatest weapon Russia possesses: military priests or priests in general who are supposed to bless the fuel pumps here with little effort so that a Ukrainian drone may never reach them. That has worked very well in the past. The Russian land bridge to Crimea now appears more like a large graveyard for supply vehicles in the footage, with destroyed or still burning trucks showing up along the route again and again. Some are right by the roadside, others lie burned out next to the road. The road is not completely cut off. Vehicles are still passing through, but each driver sees what happened to the previous one. This is becoming a growing problem for Russian logistics. Transports are getting slower, drivers are a lot more nervous, insurance companies are no longer as willing to pay, and convoys need more and more escorts. Technically, the road remains open, but even with escorts, it's no longer safe. So, what about the bridge now? We're focused on the land supply route, but the Kerch bridge remains notable, as new satellite images reveal Russia has greatly increased security there. Around the bridge, barges, floating barriers, and other protective barriers have been positioned. In addition, there are air defense systems intended to intercept attacks from the air. Above all, Russia is repeatedly trying to block access to the bridge against Ukrainian sea drones. But the images also show how many forces and resources now have to be tied up to protect this one connection. If we take a closer look at the whole thing, you can see it quite well here. Here we have the access to reach the other side of the water. This one, of course, remains open. There are no barriers on the surface of the water here. What I can imagine is that maybe 1 or 2 nets have been stretched here. And that's underwater to make sure that no underwater drones or divers can get through. What we also have are barriers around the outside, barricades. Why are they on the outside and not here? Well, obviously, ship traffic still needs to be secured here. It still has to be able to pass through here. And there are no supports here, yes, so there's no bridge piers here because it's basically a bridge on top of a bridge, you could say. Support pillars only start from here, and then they continue in pairs from this point on, right here. On the other side, we see the same thing, and those are actually the foundation of the bridge. They're the most important part. You can always replace or close the roadway, but without support pillars, the bridge collapses. And that's why they're high-value targets on the bridge and need special protection. We see the same thing on the Russian side. Here, we see a barricade that has been set up in this direction. Exactly the same thing on this side, and then another additional one on this side. And in addition, They have. We already saw earlier old cargo barges that were set up along the important infrastructure and are now floating on the water to make it difficult to attack here with surface drones. However, the Crimean bridge remains one of the most important supply routes to the peninsula, and at the same time, one of the most vulnerable targets in the entire occupied south. What also has to be said is that not as many vehicles drive over here as before. There was once an attack on the bridge. A truck with cargo drove onto the bridge, but the cargo was just a disguise because inside the supposedly safe cargo, there was a large amount of explosives. This exploded on the bridge and caused significant damage, and now the Russians hardly allow any trucks to drive over it anymore. Every vehicle is thoroughly inspected before it is allowed to cross. Trucks actually have to rely on the ferry, and that ferry was also attacked yesterday. So I want to prevent something like this from happening again at all costs. Russian citizens are casually filming the position of an anti-aircraft vehicle here and then uploading the video publicly to the internet. Recently, I showed you that by using streets, buildings, and other information about the surroundings, you can geolocate a location quite accurately in a short time, sometimes in just a few minutes. You don't need a spy on site like in the past. You don't need satellite images. You don't need special technology. Often, just a few seconds of video footage and a few distinctive points in the background are enough, just like here. You just saw the video. The air defense system is actually supposed to protect military infrastructure, but the location is kindly provided for free by the citizens themselves. It took me about 8 minutes to geolocate. I didn't track the exact time, but it was between 6 and 8 minutes. What helped me with that? Well, for one thing, this traffic sign here, which shows the next entrances to the Moscow Ring Road. So we already know that it was in Moscow, and we know which highway it was recorded on. In addition, we can see some structures here. We also see steel beams and some concrete. A parking garage is probably being built there. We can also see the parking signs on the right side of the road. And down there, it always says something like, "Here is the bus service, this way to parking lot P4, and so on and so forth." And what's really important is the ground, specifically the road the car is driving on. We see 3 lanes going in one direction. We see a crosswalk there. We also see a speed bump. And what we also see are 3 arrows that mark the 3 lanes going in one direction. All right, so I looked around a bit, checked where the exits are, and I measured the exit a little. In the end, I walked around the Moscow Ring Highway once, and I first thought about where it would make sense to set up more air defense now. Naturally, you'd place air defense systems where the last attack occurred. Where was that? Here, along the refinery, and this refinery is located in this area, basically here, where the Moscow Highway runs. That's where the refinery is, the one that was heavily attacked recently. We can see it here in this area, so it would definitely make sense to strengthen air defenses here. All right, then I took a look at where the next highway interchanges are. So for example, there would be one here and one here. I checked roughly where the on-ramps are, then used my compass to draw over it and realized it must be somewhere in this region, about 200 meters around this exit. Then I looked around and take a look here. It's that easy to figure out. Here's the parking lot we saw. Here, that shadow that's falling everywhere here, those are the support pillars of the parking garage that hasn't been completed yet. And here we can clearly see the rocker panel, then the crosswalk, and these 3 arrows. And if you remember the video, we once saw an anti-aircraft system on a bridge. To the right here, that's this one. And then this bridge made a curve to the left. That's where the next anti-aircraft system was. The vehicle drove along that path, and this picture was taken there. That was recorded roughly at this spot here, or possibly a bit further up front. That's also possible. This road was actually rebuilt. It no longer runs along the left here. Now it goes straight ahead and then to the left. This whole area here is actually a construction site, and that corrugated iron fence you saw at the very end is actually located here, which means it was actually here. And then the road was basically rerouted here. Unfortunately, the images on Google Maps are no longer up to date. As you can see, if I jump in here now, the whole thing still looks a bit different. These are the supports we saw, but the construction site itself doesn't look like this anymore. You can see for yourself, this is from June. You can't see it, but at the top left in my street view, maybe I'll just remove this for a moment. Now you can see for yourself. At the top left, It says that this is an image from 2017, and what we saw today is from the year 2026, so 9 years later. Not much has changed here, except for the street back then. As we can see, it was still a single lane with parking spaces on the side. Now in the satellite image, the whole road is now 3 lanes wide. It's brand new. And also the part of the highway that runs in the back is completely new, but we can't see it here anymore. However, if we zoom out again, you can see it yourself. Everything has already been updated there, because these images here are from the year 2026. Of course, you have to look at geolocation again. How up to date are the images? What can I do with the images? But usually the whole thing works quite well, especially if you at least have satellite images where you can recognize quite a lot. So it took 8 minutes. Now we know where 2 anti-aircraft guns are located. The Ukrainians have known for a long time. That means you can now factor them into the next round of planning. If you were to launch another attack now, you would make sure not to let the drones fly over this area anymore, because there are 2 more anti-aircraft guns here. Or you could also rethink and say, hey, these are high-value targets and I know where they are. I'll attack them as a priority. Either way, it's information you can definitely work with, and it wouldn't have existed if someone in their car hadn't just thought, wow, let's just film this thing and put it on the internet. And before anyone starts laughing or making fun of the fact that the residents are posting the guns online and thereby endangering the Russian army, if Germany were under attack, I don't think it would be any better here. Someone would always end up posting some guns online, maybe even with a complaint that the gun is so loud and always buzzing and that you can't sleep but have to work tomorrow. Or with a complaint that the aesthetics of the place are being ruined, or with a complaint that the generator runs all day and maybe it could just be turned off during quiet hours, because you really don't need something like that. Maybe someone also complains that the thing runs on diesel and not electricity, and nowadays everyone owns a smartphone and can constantly post this kind of content, which can become a real problem. Hackers have gained access to the Russian battle management system Grisar and have manipulated parts of the software. On the published screenshots, the battlefield map was covered with a Ukrainian flag. What is that supposed to be anyway? Well, it's an app for Russian troops that is extremely important. In the app, friendly and enemy positions are displayed on a digital map. Drone pilots can use the interface to mark targets and send their coordinates directly to artillery units. The system also calculates the trajectory and is supposed to shorten the time between reconnaissance and the attack. If the map shows incorrect entries and is overlaid by foreign users, or if internal internet chats are flooded with data garbage, then that's a big problem, especially if the whole thing can't be deleted anymore. That the app is distributed via Telegram and writes that we may have made the attack easier. New Android installation files, updates, and technical support are also handled through closed Telegram groups. What army would come up with such a stupid idea? Some might wonder that. Actually, it wasn't entirely their fault, because the system was actually built by civilian developers, since the Russian army didn't have a usable solution of its own at the beginning of the war. That means the whole thing came out of necessity and was then largely adopted. Now that's exactly where one of the weaknesses lies. The OSINT group. Whereas Russia today also stated that they had received extensive material. Users have obtained user manuals, training videos, patents, technical documents, Russian positions. Whether operational data beyond that was also captured has not yet been confirmed. Russian administrators claimed that such data would only be stored locally on the devices. However, even the confirmed manipulation is already uncomfortable enough for Russia. It was advertised as a modern tool for coordination on the battlefield. Now, apparently, compromised user accounts can alter maps and disrupt internal communication. Best case, the Russians must fix the software and issue new access credentials. Worst case, they can't tell which users, devices, or system versions are still trustworthy. And with a battle management system, this trust is absolutely crucial. My friends, explosions have been reported in the Bryansk region. Initial reports say railway facilities were hit by rockets and drones, while the area near the train station also faced a heavy attack. During the night, Ukrainian drones were active over the city. Afterwards, larger fires were reported at the railway facility. How extensive the damage actually is remains to be seen. If the route or freight handling is affected, it would be another blow to Russian rail logistics in the occupied south. In the occupied city of Vasilivka, a bridge was attacked. This bridge was attacked by the Air Force and there is little room for maneuver as the roadway was destroyed. It has collapsed. Large parts of the structure lie here in ruins. You can see quite significant damage here, instead of just a few small potholes, as is often suggested. The crossing has therefore collapsed. For Russian logistics, this means detours, delays, and additional pressure. Here, this is the place where the bridge used to be, right in the north of Vasilivka, in the middle of what is actually the most developed or best fortified area in southern Ukraine by the Russian forces, which we can also clearly see here from all the trenches and other symbols. In Voronezh, the Sporka semiconductor plant was heavily attacked. According to Russian sources, up to 9 Storm Shadow cruise missiles were used. Additionally, monitoring channels reported state Ukrainian Flamingo rockets and called on the population to seek shelter. A major fire broke out at the plant itself after the impacts. This is an important supplier for the Russian defense industry. The company produces electronic components for tanks, tank air defense systems, as well as parts for Iskander-K and Kh-101 cruise missiles. This means a factory was hit that supplies exactly the systems Russia uses to attack Ukrainian cities or to protect its own facilities against Ukrainian drones. So the crucial question will be which production areas were damaged and how long production will be halted. And with that, I want to thank all subscribers, channel members, and Algae Crow. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Renicky, Scylla, Dietrich, Freddie, and Meyerhofer. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next situation report.